Chainsaw Man Part 2, too slow, too boring, not enough action. I need 4 things to stimulate my brain. Believe. Quite a while now I've seen this sentiment that this story is just too slow. And I've always been curious about this. Like, okay, I can kind of see it. I don't genuinely believe it. I think people may miss what the first part of Chainsaw Man offered. This wild, chaotic experience that was just filled to the brim and very new and refreshing throughout the industry and just felt nice. It felt enjoyable. When you get to part 2, however, that newness, the fresh, suddenly starts to wear off a little bit. Instead, you treat it as something that's a lot more intimate, a lot slower, a lot more methodical, and it might be boring for some, but doesn't mean it's bad. I don't necessarily think so. On the contrary, I actually really enjoy it. I think it's fun. I think it's different. Don't you think that's pretty fun? You get more of the characters, more of the world, you get things that are expanded upon, and while it's not as quick or bashy or just... it's very much digestible. I think that's good. But I'm gonna go through these things because I know pacing has to be one of the biggest complaints that Chainsaw Man Part 2 has. It is too slow, full stop. I need more action, full stop. Where is all the funny, quirky characters, full stop? Where's the chaoticness, full stop? I get it. What the first part of Chainsaw Man provided was something very unpredictable. You didn't really know where the story was going, what you were going to get, and if this was new for you in terms of Fujimoto stories, you never read Fire Punch, you didn't know what to expect, and that was a great thing. Now that you're accustomed to the first 100 chapters, you kind of get how Chainsaw Man operates. Fujimoto expands the story in a different way, and that expansion is a lot slower. He's changed the overall appeal of the story. Now, this appeal was in there within part 1, but it was kind of not as obviously played upon. The relationship and characteristic building between Denji and Aki and Power alongside Makima, Kobeni, basically every character you like and the way that they were presented within the story mixed in, jammed in there between all of that action was really entertaining. Now that the action isn't really the highlight of part 2, all of that entertaining characteristic is spread out a little bit more evenly. It's not just piled on within one segment, squished between 2 massive moments. Now it is the moment. It's the star.
Leave a like and subscribe, please.
It's the look at me. It is perfectly fine. If you don't like it, that's entirely up to you. That's just a taste in storytelling. But for me, I think it does wonders to Fujimoto's work, because if this man can write anything, it is characters that he excels at. Their relationships, the intimacy, the emotion, their mental and physical aspects, how that is explored and expanded upon in a way that is compelling to witness. It's not overindulgent. It feels really nice to understand Denji as a character, how he goes throughout his day-to-day life. And it's not just him, Asamitaka as well. Hands down, we have gotten some of the best character writing from Fujimoto with Asamitaka. And she is in a completely different ballpark to Denji, Makima, Aki, Power. A lot of you really love Asa, but at the beginning, you didn't. Who is this? This isn't Denji, give us Denji. Where's Denji? What's he? Asa took time to really fall in love with, and that's because Fujimoto took his time with building her character. This creates a much more enticing feeling, a much more compelling hook to really, really slowly reel you in to that character. Basically, the whole thought process from brain firing neuron to the words coming out of her mouth. You don't get that level of detail, that level of attention all too often. So when you do, I feel like you have to appreciate it. And because this is kind of the priority within Chainsaw Man Part 2, I actually think the action that surrounds it is a lot more terrifying. It's a lot more secluded into these pockets of situations rather than just being the situation itself. Does that make sense? The same can be said with Denji, the same can be said with Yoshida, even Fami, War, etc., etc. Anything you want to know. A lot of people didn't like this. I don't blame you. It's a very difficult thing to go from Denji to a random new main character that's going to take a lot of time to fall in love with. It's not an easy thing. Basically shooting yourself in the foot with your own story and your fan base and hoping that they patch you back up. Because realistically, if you don't like Asa, you won't like Chainsaw Man Part 2. 80% focused around her. Denji's just this added benefit that we already know a lot about, but it's still slowly growing as well. So shifting between characters, very hard thing to do. Do I think Fujimoto pulled it off? 100%. No doubt in my mind. I think he done it in a way that's very natural, very easy to enjoy, to digest, and doesn't really backseat Denji too much. When Denji starts to integrate himself back into the story, you notice it's not instant. He's not just full on taking the attention as usual, which is impressive because of the type of character he is. You can see that he's matured a lot, he's grown a lot, he's a little bit more depressed, and a lot of that attention is deflected towards Naruto, who is someone that he's taking care of. So things have become a lot more quiet. And clashing that with Asamitaka is seamless because you can jump from her back to Denji and then from Denji back to her. Back and forth, easy, doable. And that's exactly kind of what we're doing now. We're throwing the story between both of these characters, but at the beginning where it was more crucial, we stuck with her. And now a majority of you love Asamitaka, probably think that she is the best thing that Chainsaw Man has produced, the best thing potentially Fujimoto has produced, and arguably one of the best characters for Chainsaw Man's entire universe. Was it difficult for him to do? Honestly, probably not. I feel like he has this ability to create characters that stand out in a really interesting way that people just fall in love with. Kobeni is arguably the least touched character in the story. He barely writes her. I think he himself in an interview said he doesn't really like her character and was going to kill her off, yet the fan base adore her because she's quirky, because she stands out, because she does. There is no action, not enough of it, the level isn't high enough, it ain't gritty enough, it ain't dark enough, it ain't bad enough, it ain't crazy enough, it ain't this, it ain't. There is an increasing number of people that really think that part 2 doesn't have enough action. Partially, I would agree, but not for the reasons that you'd think. I think the action we have got is a lot more controlled. There's a lot more, precision and afterthought. In part 1, a lot of the action was blurred together, or it was kind of just pushed in there to emphasize an enticing reading experience, which is pretty normal for Weekly Shonen Jump stories. Part 2, however, it feels a lot more in tune with providing a result. Like it wants to give you something, it wants to create something, it wants to add to this character or to this event or to this thing. So there's always some sort of valuable result that comes from part 2 action. And I think that's well okay. Now you could argue that the attention to detail or the way Fujimoto draws the action is very different. I would agree, but I also think that's just the change in magazines as well. You're in a different landscape now, a different playing field. You don't have to adhere to these weekly doses of dopamine when it comes to writing your action. You can have a lot of action in one chapter and then finish it the next week. You don't need to tailor the entire structure to a week-to-week format so you can split potentially one chapter interaction of fighting over 4 weeks. Fujimoto is not that any longer. Half the reason why part 2 feels so different is not weekly anymore. Even though you might get chapters weekly, the story that you're reading is not. Spending so much downtime just to enjoy characters within their sensitive moments or just to show how they move throughout the day. Very small, tiring things that maybe a lot of people don't like, but add so much value to the character, to the world. You're always getting something. Think of every single action sequence and it has either. I have been told that Chainsaw Man Part 2 follows a similar direction, a similar guideline to Part 1. Partially, I agree. It's not in the sense that it's bad, but more so repurposing the structure of Part 1 to fit Part 2. To me, there is not enough overlap. There is no identical kind of story beats or elements that you're going to find in Part 2 that was in Part 1. Certain aspects, corners, or bits and pieces, of course, but genuine story beats, I don't think so. What about the overall structure? Like the whole story, what Part 2 is kind of shaping up to what Part 1 was. In a way, yeah, sure, I can give you that. But is it really that bad? Is it a poor thing? Because I guarantee you, none of us can guess where the story is going. Like, sure, yeah, Nostradamus' prophecies in the future, yada yada. It doesn't really give us anything to work off. We still don't know what Fami's trying to do. Her plan specifically. We don't know what Yoshida is trying to do. We're very focused on Denji and how he feels towards life and living a simple one. And then we have Asamitaka running around trying to help him. How in any way is the details of that similar to Part 1? It isn't. There's been a lot of things that have been repurposed for Part 2, and to me, we're just exploring a deeper version of what Part 1 originally offered. Realistically, the comfort that we have for Part 2 is with Denji and Asa, and seeing them grow is so beautiful. I love the chapters that is just with Denji. We don't even need action, and watch Denji question himself, figure himself out, but really having no guidance and stumbling over himself. And then you have someone like Asamitaka that has like 4 different personalities of a young teenage girl spliced into one being while being manipulated and used by a counterpart known as war. If you're reading Chainsaw Man Part 2 for the sole purpose of wanting action, of wanting that high octane, enjoyable, dopamine filled moment filled with fights and crazy chaoticness, you are 100% missing out. It's okay that you like those things. It's okay that you want more of it. And Fujimoto has delivered in that action. Don't even try and downplay it. The action, superb, but again, purposeful. Say it with me now. Purposeful.
But what about the chaos?